before the election. They want to impeach the president. They want open borders, get rid of ICE. They want their crumbs back desperately, more regulations, and endless, nonstop investigations into all things Donald Trump and his administration. Now, every night as we go over the news, I want you to look at things from a different perspective. As we talk to these new newsmakers on the Democratic side, ask yourself very important questions, because you're going to come to a conclusion pretty quickly, I think. Are those in power that we show you every night, ask yourself, is what they are doing good for this country? Do their comments, do their remarks, do their actions, do they strengthen the country? Will what they're doing, will it improve the lives of the American people, help the American people, advance our country's interests? Now, you can forget about a red state, blue state, Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal, left, right, doesn't matter. Is what you're seeing good for the United States of America and the American people? Because as we speak, there are some in this country so filled with anti-Trump rage every second, every minute, every hour of every day that they're willing to say and to do anything to destroy the president, his family, delegitimize the 2016 election, even if America and we, the people, suffer as a result. Many months ago, I identified what I call the 5 forces that are actively working against the president. Obviously, it's Democrats. They hate him. Then you have, of course, the establishment media. They hate him. Never Trumpers. They want to be justified in, well, not being a part of electing somebody who has governed conservatively, establishment Republicans that are weak, and the deep state. And for almost 2 years, they have been totally obsessed, as we all know by now, Russia, with a few intermittent distractions like Stormy, whatever else. But on Friday, those 5 forces suffered a serious setback when the special counsel's memos on Paul Manafort, Michael Cohen, indicated no evidence of any Trump, Russia collusion, zero. It's about taxi cab medallions, loan applications, taxes in general. Nothing about Russia or Trump. Now, the Destroy Trump forces were kind of distraught, so they sent themselves into their typical predictable convulsions. Then they settled on Plan B, their backup plan. Imaginary campaign finance violations against President Trump. That's what the Russia collusion was about. And in their sad and hate-filled world, Michael Cohen's guilty plea to making illegal campaign contributions will surely result in the end of President Trump once and for all, or so they say. Let's take a look at this manufactured but predictable hysteria.
This is a man who came in and said, I'm bigger than the House. I'm bigger than the intelligence community. I'm bigger than checks and balances. I'm bigger than the judicial community. I'm bigger than the free press. And he's going to pay for that the rest of his life.
When immigrants procure their citizenship by fraud, we strip them of their citizenship. When a president procures his presidency by fraud, should we consider doing the same?
I think the American people would support impeachment.
Donald Trump must be impeached.
He's got to know his future looks like it's behind bars.
Donald Trump is a criminal enterprise.
It certainly looks like they are the kind of offenses that would call for impeachment hearings.
You have this memorable phrase of individual number one. You know, it's going to go down, I think, in the history books, along with some of those memorable Watergate phrases.
He may be the first president in quite some time to face the real prospect of jail time.
When the evidence becomes so clear that you very likely have a criminal sitting in the Oval Office, what is the Congress left to do at that point?
These are the same people that have been saying the same lies for 2 years, and it is unfounded. According to Fox News legal analyst, our friend Greg Jarrett, if Michael Cohen's non-disclosure payment to Stormy Daniels or anybody else served a secondary purpose or a dual purpose, then it is not considered a campaign contribution and thus not illegal. In other words, if the payment benefited the Trump organization, the Trump brand name, even President Trump on a personal or family level, that's not against the law. It's as simple as that. And the president summed it up pretty perfectly on Twitter, writing, quote, there was no collusion, so now the Democrats go to a simple private transaction, wrongly call it a campaign contribution, which it was not, but even if it was, it is only a civil case like Obama's, but it was done correctly by a lawyer, and there would not even be a fine, lawyer's liability, if he made a mistake, not me. Cohen just trying to get his sentence reduced, witch hunt. Now remember, Cohen changed their story on this particular issue. And it's fascinating because the liberal media and the Democrats, they only want to pick the version that fits their desired political goal. They didn't believe him the first time. He even initially stated that the Daniels payment, for example, came out of his own pocket without the president's knowledge. And sadly, most of his alleged crimes do include lying and fraud. But the media wants to believe Cohn now. They don't like Michael Cohn. They've never liked Michael Cohn. And they're not his friend today. And meanwhile, the president has acted in accordance with the law, committed no criminal campaign finance violation, and he sure as hell never colluded with Russia, which is what this was supposed to be about. But then we have disgraced FBI Director James Comey. He's never let the presumption of innocence get in the way of his complete and total obsessive hatred for President Trump. Last night he called on Americans to oust President Trump with, quote, every breath we have. But he's not biased at all. Take a look.
All of us should use every breath we have to make sure that the lying stops on January 20th, 2021.
Oh, I guess he doesn't have a political agenda. The same guy that leaked information to get Robert Mueller appointed. Oh, that's the same Comey that might have espionage issues himself by releasing those documents, and the same guy that, well, may be in trouble himself with the law. I have some advice for Jim Comey. Don't throw stones from a glass house. It's December, but the year of the boomerang is not quite over. Now, late last week, Comey testified behind closed doors on Capitol Hill about the multitude of serious controversies surrounding his leadership at the FBI, including FISA abuse, his handling of the Clinton investigation. And for a man who claims to have such integrity, such a great memory, he seemed to have a really hard time answering questions or remembering anything that mattered. In fact, many of those in the room accused him of using his attorneys to run interference, while another 245 times he says he can't remember in one shape, manner, or form.
The Republicans came out and said that a government lawyer sort of ran interference and shut down specific lines of questioning. Did that happen? And if so, what topics were not discussed?
When you read the transcript, and I think you will not see that happening.
And he did admit, by the way, that the Steele dossier was never verified. You know, the bulk of the FISA application, we'll get to that in a second. So another lie from James Comey. Now, the transcript is out. It was happening over and over and over again, 250 times. According to Trey Gowdy, during his testimony, he answered, I don't recall 71 times. Get this. He stated, I don't know an additional 166 times. One lawmaker reportedly said, quote, his memory was so bad, I feared he might not remember how to get out of the room after the interview. Another claimed, quote, it was like he suddenly developed Alzheimer's after conveniently remembering enough facts to sell his book. Pretty awful. A lot of selective amnesia from someone who claims to be an innocent man. But even more troubling is this, is something Comey actually said during this hearing. According to this transcript from Friday, he admitted Hillary's bought and paid for dirty Russian dossier, the one that was used to commit a fraud 4 separate occasions on FISA courts, was never verified either before or after the FISA warrant application. Let me explain this. In other words, the FBI and the DOJ had zero idea if what they were using to get one of the hardest warrants to get, a FISA warrant, zero clue whether any of the evidence was credible, true, and corroborated, which by law and by protocol must happen as a matter of course. They spied on an American citizen, trampled on his Fourth Amendment constitutional rights, a Trump campaign associate, with information paid for by the Clinton campaign and the DNC that we now know is completely and totally unverified. But wait, didn't Rod Rosenstein or Sally Yates, who signed off on the final FISA application, didn't he say that law enforcement, if they're going to sign a FISA warrant, didn't he say that that officer must swear that the information in the FISA request is true and accurate? And if he get it wrong, there are serious consequences. I know because, well, I have the tape.
There's a lot of talk about FISA applications, and many people that I see talking about it seem not to recognize what a FISA application is. A FISA application is actually a warrant, just like a search warrant, in order to get a FISA search warrant, you need an affidavit signed by a career federal law enforcement officer who swears that the information in the affidavit is true and correct to the best of his knowledge and belief. And that's the way we operate. And if it's wrong, sometimes it is, if you find out there's anything incorrect in there, that person is going to face consequences.
Comey's going to face consequences. I'm just waiting to find out what they are. An American was spied on by your federal government. Think about this. With a warrant based on what was uncorroborated, unverified, opposition research, bought and paid for Russian lies by Hillary Clinton. And they never told the judge that Hillary paid for it, ever. Multiple judges were lied to. Multiple frauds were committed on the FISA court. When will we hear from the FISA judges? Because those would be crimes in all likelihood. Our own Greg Jarrett has identified 6 specific felonies that would be applicable on this case alone. Now, if the left really cared about civil liberties, they would be demanding an investigation. They would care about equal justice under the law, equal application of our laws, and our constitutional rights. But like with everything else, to destroy Trump forces, they're willing to put all their hatred for the president above everything else. For them, it's always politics. That trumps, no pun intended, all. It's the very reason they tried to ruin Justice Kavanaugh's life without any due process, without any presumption of innocence, on a case that had happened 36 years prior. But at the same time, they barely yawned, said nothing over recent abuse allegations, physical, emotional, against Keith Ellison, their number 2 at the Clinton. None of them spoke out about Michael Avenatti. If you're a Democrat, you don't get the Kavanaugh treatment. It's the very reason why they obsess about Russia for years, but they ignore the Uranium One scandal, where Vladimir Putin had a network inside of this country, the foundational material of nuclear weapons, for crying out loud. 20% of America's foundational material for nuclear weapons. Putin's network in America, we have a spy in there that's chronicling bribery, kickbacks, money laundering, extortion. And he's telling the FBI, oh, then Robert Mueller. But the deal still went through. Hillary approved it. And guess what? Her foundation ended up, for people involved in that deal, $145 million given to the Clinton Foundation. And yeah, some of that uranium left the United States. Where's the outrage over that serious Russia scandal? Why would we ever allow Putin's thugs in America to get a hold of our uranium, and we don't even have enough uranium as a country? Where's that investigation? And in the case of Hillary's dirty dossier, okay, same year, 2016, Russian influence, her campaign funneled millions of dollars, through a law firm. I bet if Manafort or Michael Cohen did it, they'd be arrested. But anyway, then using an op research firm, hiring a foreign national who uses questionable spies from Russia, Christopher Steele, puts together research from his sources in Russia. The dossier is based on Russian lies paid for by Hillary, literally leaked to the American people to influence the 2016 election. I thought we were investigating Russian influence in the election. No investigation into bought and paid for lies to influence the American people. So you think about this when you turn on these other networks or pick up a newspaper. You know, you think about this if you listen to any Democrat across this country in their sanctimony, in their lectures, talk about campaign finance. There's no Trump-Russia collusion, but we have major mistakes. Let's see, Vladimir Putin. Tell Vladimir I'll have more flexibility after the election. Dmitry Medvedev. Or the Uranium One deal, or what we were just talking about, and that relates to the dossier. Joining us now, South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham. Senator, I have one big question. You're laughing?
That's a lot to unpack. That was pretty good. That was good.
I don't trust Putin. I think he's a thug. I think he sent his thugs here. We had a FBI spy in his network. He's trying to get a foothold in our uranium industry. Bribery, kickback, money laundering, we all knew about it, but they still signed off on that deal, and Hillary benefited through the foundation. She paid for a Russian dossier full of lies, absolute lies that were disseminated to the American people. Where's that investigation, Senator?
Well, we should have had a special counsel appointed a long time ago to look at all things Clinton. So here's what I will do if I'm the chairman of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate next year. I'm going to look at the FISA warrant application. How much of it was based on the dossier? Was there any information beyond the dossier offered to get the warrant? And if the dossier was unverified, how could you swear to the court it was accurate? Somebody misled the court. So I promise you and your listeners that we're going to find out how this warrant was issued. How could a judge determine there was probable cause if the only document was the dossier that was unverified? How did the system break down?
Senator, I got to be honest. Not only did it not break, that information was pushed out to the American people. They didn't verify it, nor did they tell the court something I believe is pertinent, that Hillary paid for it. Why would they not tell? Why would they hide that from the court?
So to issue a warrant against an American citizen to surveil them under the FISA statute, the judge has to believe there's probable cause that the person is connected to a foreign entity. If the document that the judge was given was paid for by a political party and the opposing candidate, and it was never verified, and it's not verified to this day, what happens to those who submit the document to the court? If they're not punished, you're going to reinforce doing this in the future. Imagine if it was the Trump campaign, the RNC hired a foreign agent to get a political dossier against Clinton given to the court that turned out to be a bunch of garbage. It'd be front page news all over the world. We're not going to let this go because it's important to the American people that the FISA warrant application process
Let me ask you this.
correctly.
Will we get to the bottom? Obviously, Comey's biased and wanted Hillary to win, as was Peter Strzok, who interviewed her, who thought that she should win 100 million to 0. My question is, are we going to now go back to the investigation into her illegal server with classified and top secret information on it, too? Are we going to get into the uranium one? How did that ever happen? Was there a quid pro quo? And who would appoint the special counsel? Would it be the new attorney general? Can the president do it? Can you do it?
Well, it'd be the new attorney general. And here's, I think, what's frustrating to you and others is that when Mueller's done, nobody can doubt that Trump was looked at very hard. They're trying to flip people right and left. None of that was done during the Clinton investigation. As a matter of fact, the people involved in investigating Clinton wanted her to win and Trump to lose. So we've never had the same scrutiny. I hope in the future that's corrected.
Last question. Can the president get the you're telling the president hold out for the $5 billion for the wall, or don't do the deal?
Dig in, don't give in, get the $5 billion, put DACA on the table, make them say no to wall funding, make them say no to relief for the DACA recipients. Stay strong, Mr. President. You got the right, you're on the right side of this issue.
All right, Lindsey Graham, good to see you. Thank you. And coming up, a rare exclusive one-on-one interview with senior advisor to the president. Doesn't do many interviews, Jared Kushner. He's next. Also, Newt Gingrich tonight. And the war on Christmas may be worse than ever. Straight ahead.
Over, toast, cooked, done for good, and along with it, any hope of the middle-class revolution that 63 million Americans voted for 2 years ago. The reason for this tragedy is simple. The president has been caught committing felonies. Here's what the legal experts without law degrees are saying on television.
If precedent means anything in the Trump era, Donald Trump must be impeached because of the crimes prosecutors say he committed in the Michael Cohen case.
Both parties need to get on board to pass articles of impeachment. You have conspiracy, you have obstruction, you have campaigns finance, and you have emoluments. If the Democrats do not pursue this vigorously, they will be in some ways held accountable for abdicating their responsibility. It goes to the moral question, the ethical question. Democracy is at stake.
This criminal must be brought up by the Congress of the United States for impeachment.
We're not even going to show you the Don Lemon tape. There's a lot of emotion there. But to sum up, they're telling us that we're staring down the barrel of a constitutional crisis. And that crisis stems from what MSNBC describes as, quote, the crimes prosecutors say the president committed in the Michael Cohen case. Which crimes were those? We have the answer. The relevant details were spelled out in a piece that ran over the weekend in the New York Times under this headline, quote, prosecutors say Trump directed illegal payments during campaign. The gist of the story is this. Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, has told federal prosecutors that he facilitated payments to 2 women who said they had affairs with Donald Trump. And then, well, actually, that's it. That's the entire story right there. Paying these 2 women, say federal prosecutors and their flacks at NBC News, was a serious crime, a crime worthy of impeachment, if not indictment. Okay, but you might be wondering, how exactly is that criminal? Well, we're going to explain it to you. We're going to start by stipulating that everything Michael Cohen has told the feds is absolutely true. Now, assuming honesty isn't usually a wise idea with Michael Cohen, but for the sake of argument, let's do case. Everything he says is true. Why is what Cohen is alleging a criminal offense? Remember the facts of the story. These are undisputed. 2 women approached Donald Trump and threatened to ruin his career and humiliate his family if he doesn't give them money. Now, that sounds like a classic case of extortion. Yet, for whatever reason, Trump caves to it, and he directs Michael Cohen to pay the ransom. Now, more than 2 years later, Trump is a felon for doing this. It doesn't seem to make any sense. Oh, but you're not a federal prosecutor on a political mission. If you were a federal prosecutor on a political mission, you would construe those extortion payments as campaign contributions. You do this even though the money in question did not come from or go to Donald Trump's presidential campaign. Then you'd claim that Trump and Michael Cohen violated campaign finance law because they didn't publicly disclose those payments, despite the fact that disclosing them would nullify the reason for making them in the first place, which was to keep the whole thing secret. That is the argument you would make, both in federal court and through your proxies on cable television. It is insultingly stupid, but because everyone in power hates the target of your investigation, nobody would question you. And that's what's happening right now. Now, by this reasoning, any money a political candidate spends to maintain or protect his image while running for office now qualifies as a regulated campaign donation and has to be disclosed. That would include, by the way, in addition to an infinite number of other things, buying toothpaste and getting a haircut. It would definitely include the taxpayer finance slush fund that Congress has set aside to pay off its own sexual harassment claims. Yes, those now qualify as campaign contributions. They must be publicly disclosed. Except, of course, they're not publicly disclosed, and they never will be. Why is that? Well, that might be a question for congressional leaders, including, now that we think about it, Congressman Adam Schiff of Burbank, California. He's the incoming chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, a very powerful man in the Congress. What does Mr. Schiff have to say about Congress not disclosing the very same payments that Democrats say Trump should be impeached for not disclosing? Let's ask him.
There's a very real prospect that on the day Donald Trump leaves office, the Justice Department may indict him, that he may be the first president in quite some time to face the real prospect of jail time.
Trump knows that he's facing some pretty strong criminal liability when he leaves office, one way or another. And, you know, even if a sitting president can't be indicted, he's got to know his future looks like it's behind bars unless he cuts some sort of deal with the prosecutors.
So to translate, Trump's a criminal. He's going to jail for committing a smaller version of the same made-up crime that we in Congress have committed for years and forced you to pay for. And by the way, we're never apologizing for that, because we don't have to, and CNN isn't going to make us. Screw you, America, and your stupid election. We're in charge. That's the real message here, in case you missed it. Chris Hahn is a radio host and former aide to Senator Chuck Schumer, and he joins us tonight. So, Chris, I know you don't like Trump. That's fine. But speak slowly so I can understand, and explain to me why paying off someone who is extorting you, threatening to make public details of your personal life if she doesn't get paid, why paying that person is a felony.
Well, first of all, we don't know that there was actual extortion here. We know that a payment was made. There was a catch and kill deal with the National Enquirer. Whether or not it was extortion, that hasn't been proven yet, nor has it even really been alleged in many cases.
Well,
I'm
alleging. Let me just stop and say I'm alleging it because it's obvious. You're not going to pay $100 grand or 150 or 200 grand to someone unless there's a threat to you and your reputation. This is extortion. Now, I don't know why it's not being prosecuted. I don't know why Trump isn't defending himself on those grounds. I would, but it clearly is extortion. Well, but why is it a crime to pay off someone who you had an affair with?
Sometimes people want to tell us they want to tell a story that he doesn't want told. He says, hey, just tell it to me. I'll pay for it and pay for yourself. That's what he did.
That's what if I did that to you, you would call it. If I said, look, I know a detail about your sex life, Chris Hahn, and I'm going to tell it on my show on TV unless you pay me, that would be extortion, obviously. So this is extortion. But leaving that aside, why is it a felony to pay women you've had sexual relationships with?
It's not a felony. It's a felony to do a campaign expenditure and not disclose it. And that's what
How is
this
that
has
a campaign
been.
expenditure?
This seems to have been a campaign. He made this during the campaign for the purposes of the campaign. There are tape recordings of him discussing this with Michael Cohen. And that's just
for the
one.
purposes of the campaign.
But
hold on. I'm confused. No, it's not a small thing. It's the thing. This is the crime that the New York Times told us on Saturday. Federal prosecutors are alleging the president committed. It's a felony. And Michael Cohen pled guilty to a species of this. So I just want to get to the bottom of it. Why is that a campaign contribution to pay off a former girlfriend? I'm honestly confused. You're a campaign guy. Tell me.
Look, there's also an allegation that he may have violated the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act when he was doing his deal in Moscow.
There are allegations that he killed Kennedy. But hold on.
There's a lot more to this than just paying off porn
how about
stars
one
who he slept
allegation? One allegation at a time. So federal prosecutors, this is not just something that dumb people on TV are talking about, though they are. This is something that prosecutors in New York State are saying they have apparently evidence to indict over. So tell me why, because a lot of people in Washington pay off their girlfriends, including lots of people in Congress. A lot of people in Congress, including, I'd even guess, some Democrats. Just throwing that out there. So tell me why that's a campaign contribution to pay off your girlfriend.
Well, first of all, I think that fund that Congress was using to pay people off who were harassed needs to be disclosed, and the members who were involved with those disclosure decisions need to be removed.
Oh, I'm sure that'll happen right away. That'll happen right away. I'm sure MSNBC will push real hard for that. Right, okay. So, but tell me why it's a campaign.
I agree with you on that point.
This is a central question. Why is it, and for all of us, why is that a campaign contribution? The money didn't come from the campaign. It didn't go to the campaign. It was a threat to his reputation and his livelihood, as all extortion is, right? So why is that a campaign contribution?
There's black letter law. There's black letter law here, okay? The campaign finance law is pretty clear about what you can and cannot do with funds. And these funds were not necessarily from Trump's own pockets. There was all sorts of schemes put together by the president and Michael Cohen to move this money around, so it wasn't traced back to President Trump.
But hold on.
That in and of itself should raise red flags. People would be blowing their mind out right now if this was any other president.
Maybe. I mean, we've never had a president like Trump in a million different ways. And I'm not defending.
No, we never have.
I'm not defending his personal life. I'm merely saying this is now being described as a felony, as a crime for which the president could be removed. So now's the time when we need to be very specific about what the crime is, because you've stopped all business of government so we can respond to this. So let's respond right now. Tell me how and where in campaign finance law it says you're not allowed to use your money, there's no allegation this was campaign money, your money to pay off a former girlfriend. There isn't. That's made up. It's a lie.
The allegation here is not. The allegation here is not that it's just his money. There's allegation that he moved money around through various schemes to pay these women off.
Not from the campaign. No, but by the way, you're allowed to do that too. You're allowed to hide the payments. What is that a crime now?
The payments that were campaign in nature. That is a violation of campaign. A clear violation of campaign finance law.
I'm giving you a chance on TV. Hold on. No, just I'll let you speak, and I'll let you speak solely so our audience can understand. Where in campaign finance law does it say that taking money that's not from your political campaign to respond to an extortion attempt or pay off your girlfriend or pay the gardener or pay anybody? Why is that a felony? Where does it say that? What are you talking about?
Campaign finance law. Look, I'm not going to quote the section and verse. I don't know it off the top of my head, even though I am a lawyer. But campaign finance law clearly states that any money spent for campaign purposes, specifically by people other than the candidate, must be disclosed.
But why is that a campaign purpose?
Here that hold on. The president and Michael Cohen clearly set up a scheme so that other people could pay these women off on behalf of Donald Trump while he was running for president because they thought that these allegations would sink his campaign and his reputation.
But maybe
that's a violation.
Actually, because anybody faced, I don't know a single man who faced with that allegation, who if he thought he could squelch it, wouldn't pay the person off because it does incalculable damage to your reputation, whether you're running for anything or not. And so it's so clearly not a campaign violation that I wonder if we want to set this precedent. Do you want to live in a world where people paying off extortion attempts are now campaign finance felons? I mean, this is lunatic, and you know it.
This is strikingly similar to what happened to John Edwards.
Yes,
I'm not
and
saying
it's
the president
awful.
will be
It's
convicted,
awful what happened to John Edwards.
This is strikingly similar situation.
And what happened to him was wrong.
Look,
it was another populist they took out with this BS campaign finance nonsense. Exactly what happened.
Look,
anyway,
it is more than campaign finance law.
Well,
it's more than campaign finance law. It is the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act.
Well, that's a totally separate thing.
Problem.
Look, if he violated that, I won't defend
and it's also
but in
alleged
this
by
case,
Cohen.
this
It's
is made
also
up.
part of this.
All right. Chris Hunt, thank you.
Thank you,
Good to see you. One of the most hysterical reactions in the past few days came from a former Obama administration U.S. attorney who says the president should be stripped of his office.
It could be that President Trump procured the presidency by fraud. When immigrants procure their citizenship by fraud, we strip them of their citizenship. When a president procures his presidency by fraud, should we consider doing the same?
Alan Dershowitz is, of course, a retired Harvard Law School professor. He's the author of the book, The Case Against Impeaching Trump, and he joins us tonight. Professor, I got a couple questions, but the first relates just to the soundbite we played. Is there a provision in the Constitution for stripping, whatever that means, stripping the presidency from a president who you think is illegitimate, whatever that means?
Sure, it's called the 25th Amendment, but not on the grounds of illegitimacy. I want everyone out there to imagine the following scenario. Let's assume when Bill Clinton was running for president, Paula Jones came up to him and said, unless you pay me $130,000, I'll reveal our affair. And let's assume Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton together did exactly what it's alleged that Donald Trump and Cohen did together. I guarantee you the New York Times, NBC, MSNBC would be railing against any prosecutor who dared to suggest that this was a violation of the campaign finance law. Everybody would be on the other side of this issue. There'd be Republicans out there saying, strip him of the presidency, impeach him, indict him. Every Democrat would be saying, this is a witch hunt. This is terrible. We need a single standard. If you wouldn't go after Bill Clinton, don't go after Donald Trump. If you're going after Donald Trump, then you have to go after Hillary Clinton for everything that she allegedly did. For example, one of your guests talked about the Federal Corrupt Practices Act. That applies when you bribe a foreign official. What they're arguing is that there was a rumor that maybe somebody offered Putin a penthouse in a tower that Trump was thinking of building in Moscow. And if that had been done, it would be a violation of the FCPA, Federal Corrupt Practices Act. But it's all based on hypotheticals and maybes. And I just want everybody to apply the shoe on the other foot test. If Hillary Clinton were president and the Republicans were saying lock her up, everybody would be on the other side. They'd be screaming about how dare you expand criminal statutes? How dare you expand the criteria for impeachment? Now all these liberal Democrat, fair-weather civil libertarians are saying the hell with the Constitution, the hell with civil liberties, put all that aside, get Trump. That's the most important consideration. Get him by any means possible. This is such a danger to our constitutional system that I would hope that true civil libertarians would rebel against it as I am.
Is it unfair to describe this scenario as extortion? I say, I know something about your sex life. I know a secret about you that you want to keep, that's non-criminal, but that you want to keep hidden. And unless you pay me money, I'm going to reveal it. That seems like textbook extortion to me. Why is it not?
It is absolutely textbook extortion, and there ought to be a prosecution of any person, man or woman, who approaches any candidate or anybody else and says, unless you pay me money, I'm going to reveal a sex act that occurred. That is absolute classic extortion. And it's shocking that the special counsel looking into this, who has a broad mandate, he described it very broadly, isn't looking into the extortion committed by at least the porn star whose lawyer obviously approached the candidate or the candidate's people and threatened exposure. Otherwise, why would you pay? Just listen to the tape. The tape makes that clear. The tape that Cohen made unwittingly of President Trump. It's clear that they were paying off an extortion in order to prevent these issues from coming out for multiple reasons, to protect his family, to protect his brand, possibly to influence the campaign. Let's remember one more thing. A president can contribute a candidate as much as he wants. If Bloomberg runs for president, he could announce tomorrow, I'm not taking a nickel. I'm putting $1 billion of my own money into this campaign. That's perfectly legitimate. As far as reporting is concerned, it's the campaign that has to report. And if these payments had to be reported, they had to be reported after the election. The reporting time was after the election. So it couldn't have impacted the election. So the absurd notion that he won the presidency by fraud and should be stripped of the presidency reflects incredible ignorance about the timing here and how these statutes operate.
This is getting so crazy, it's making my head spin. I appreciate your coming on and explaining that to us, Professor. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, we've been saying it for a couple of years. Now we have hard scientific evidence that, in fact, big tech is altering and harming the brains of children. Is it time to do something about that? What if you knew it was true? Well, we do know it's true now. We've got details next. Well, Google collects more data than probably any other company and probably knows more about you than you do. You'd think this might raise some concerns about the concentration of power, but for years, Congress seems to have cared not at all, either because they were ideologically predisposed to Google or because they were in its pocket. Meanwhile, Google became more and more powerful, ominously powerful. Now, finally, during a lame duck session, Congress has summoned the CEO of Google, Sundar Pichai, to answer some questions about data transparency. Coming to Capitol Hill this week, what should Congress ask him about? Harmeet Dillon has followed this issue maybe more closely than any other attorney in the United States, and she joins us tonight. Harmeet, thank you very much for coming on. So what should be the list of questions?
Well, this is only a subset of the issues that people should be asking Google. That is the subject of the testimony tomorrow. But Google, for years, as you pointed out, has been collecting data and not disclosing to users, number one, the extent of the collection of the data or what they're doing with the data. We have also learned of significant breaches, including today an announcement of a major breach of 52.5 million users in the Google Plus failed experiment in social media. It's not clear when that happened. Google is not disclosing to people exactly what happened and what use has been made of it. And they, as you pointed out, they just get away with it because we have both effete politicians in Washington, even on the Republican side, and government agencies whose tasks it is to examine these issues and protect consumers. So consumers are really at a complete loss. Now, what I expect to happen on Capitol Hill tomorrow is that there'll be some posturing questions written by staffers that members of Congress are going to read out, and you're going to have some focus group tested, jargony, incomprehensible responses from Sundar Pichai designed to placate these folks. There'll be a little bit of a dance and everybody will go home not understanding what the answers were and not probably going to do anything about it. And this is a real tragedy and missed opportunity, Tucker.
What a shame. I want to ask you another story, another element of the Google story. Newly leaked emails show that several Google employees plotted to destroy the news site Breitbart after the 2016 election. A secret internal discussion group labeled Resist. Google employees discussed how they could use the, quote, hate speech and fake news labels to justify cutting off Breitbart's ad revenues. Harmeet, this is kind of the stuff of conservative fever dreams that Google would be actually doing something like this. Are you surprised by it, and what can be done in response?
Well, Google, A, I'm not surprised. B, Google is denying it, but there's extensive evidence that Google did this, and they did it in two ways. One way is right after the election, as you mentioned, a number of very excitable left-wing Google executives and employees tried to squeeze Breitbart and other conservative outlets into this hate speech category. They then confessed that after a lot of effort, that was really tough. So they also did a two-pronged approach, and the other side of that approach is having their ad people contact customers and tell them that it might be dangerous or a bad idea to advertise or allow their ads to be placed on conservative news websites like Breitbart and others. And they pointed to some outside groups like Sleeping Giant that makes it a business practice of defaming conservative writers and organizations and use that as a smear. Google also does this in many other ways, like through its YouTube. It categorizes content as sensitive, which automatically both makes it hard to find the content online and also strips that content from the ability to gain advertising revenue. So Google is doing this systematically. Google is doing this purposefully. Google is getting away with doing this, and I think it violates not just some laws, including Communications Decency Act and others, but it violates state laws that have to do with fraud and transparency, unfair business practices, and competition. Yeah. Again, Google is able to get away with this because they contribute to some conservative groups like CPAC, a lot of money to show up at CPAC, and certainly on Capitol Hill they get away with it, and we see nothing done to control this duopoly and monopoly on advertising revenue. It's very dangerous because it's shaping what young people in America who mainly get their news through Google see every day.
Looking back, the Congress allowing Google to become